Welcome back to the Masters of Modern podcast, now known as the MMcast, previously the Masters of Modern podcast. I am your host, Alex Kessler, here with my co-host, Ben Bateman.
What's up, guys?
Was that like a reload situation?
I don't even really know what it was. It was like a that's kind of what it was.
Okay, not finger guns. It was like, okay. And today we have a special guest, Dan Sheehan. Hello, welcome to the cast. You hail from the Commander Sphere, which you have new episodes every Monday, and you have a Patreon and Twitter, at Commander Sphere, and then you are at It's Dan Sheehan, or at Sick Wolves, and then Rachel is at Rachel Reeks. I did all of that correctly. Yeah. All of that will be linked below.
If you go to Command Sphere, it's all there.
Perfect.
But yeah, we're out every Monday. We've got a new episode.
So really briefly, tell us about kind of the Commander Sphere, just for our listeners who may or not may know.
Yeah, of course. So the show, me and Rachel Weeks started the show just over a year ago. We started in like December of 2019. I had played Magic a ton growing up, and then kind of stopped from around like 2008 until around like 2018, 2019. And then Rachel got me back in via playing Commander. And so I like immediately dove into Commander from the perspective of somebody who, it's definitely like more of a casual fun thing for me. Like that's what appealed to me about it, was just like the social aspect. That it's like a version of Magic where you're just kind of hanging out. You're just shooting the breeze with friends, having a good time. You get to use cards from 10, 15 years ago. That was a huge appeal for me. And so all those aspects of the game, we found that there wasn't like a lot of people talking about just pure casual Commander. There's a lot of like, talk about competitive Commander. There's a lot of talk about different power levels, but like that lower end of just like purely in it for the fun of the game. Like we wanted to have a podcast that kind of embodied like that philosophy. And we've been trying to articulate it over the last year. And I feel like this Lasagna Tier thing we've been talking about over the last couple of weeks has kind of been our best articulation of the play style yet. So basically the podcast is for anybody who just likes playing Commander and likes playing it in a way that's less focused on optimization and more focused on just having a good time with pals. It's equal parts goofs and insight, and you're not going to find a lot of like ruthlessly optimized deck text, but you will find a whole episode about which creatures from Magic we would eat if we could.
I've had that conversation with more people than it's probably comfortable.
Everyone thought about it.
Awesome. And so for our listeners, what we're kind of talking about today is Commander power level rankings to an extent. Specifically, they've come out with this kind of Lasagna Tier idea, as well as kind of where some of the CDH community guys have come towards it, where it's more on, I'm gonna actually look it up the name now and not just read out what I'm talking about. It's Formula X1 EDH is what they're calling it. So it's kind of different spectrums of this version of like, not necessarily playing Magic to win, but like rankings on entertainment value is almost what it kind of feels like. And so we wanted to get into that and get on the conversation, especially since I've been getting Ben into Commander basically since August, in a pretty significant way, from someone who like absolutely refused to play it for years, and where we found kind of a home and where we're having the most fun. So it's definitely what we wanted to talk about today. Before we jump too far into it, two things. First, we're going to do a little game of seeing which cards from the new set we're all most excited by. Also big first, just shout out to our Patreon. So thank you all to all of our patrons. One thing that we do want to bring up is for the last kind of like 2 months before the break, we were doing daily content on the YouTube channel that was like broken into 5 episodes. It ends up that's like a really kind of intense thing to do and is expensive. And right now, based on how much we're making on Patreon, we don't quite make enough to kind of keep that as a sustainable thing. So once in a while we might be able to do it. But if you want us to do it more, if you liked that type of kind of content release, we're breaking this up in video form, please check our Patreon out. If you can donate any amount of money, it really helps make that possible. We'll put on there a nice little tier list of like, once we hit this $1 amount, which I don't know what it is off the top of my head, we'll start doing that again. So if you can check that out, we really appreciate it. We thought it was a really cool way of doing content, and I know a lot of people appreciate it. So check out patreon.com/theMMcast to help us make that happen. And then also starting this week, the video version of this episode, the raw feed, which had previously been all audio, which is like the full episode, no edits, plus about 10 to 15 minutes of extra content every episode at the beginning about not necessarily Magic stuff, but only for patrons, is now going to be video as well. So it's not just going to be it won't just be the audio only format. We're doing video as well. So please check that out. Check out the Patreon. It's really, really, really cool. And we are appreciative of all of you. And last, thank you. Thank you, Wizards. I got a box. It was cool. It looked like a speaker. It's right there. Inside came this really dope Kaldheim shirt. And I have the Kaldheim concert badge that I'm wearing because I'm backstage at Kaldheim. This set's really cool and we're really hyped. And I am extremely appreciative. Ben also, I believe, may secretly have a box that looks about the exact same size and from the exact same forwarding address. So when he eventually is willing to sneak over to our office where it's COVID safe, he's going to pick it up, and he will also maybe wear the shirt in the future. But thank you so much. It's really dope and was really, really cool. Now, on to Kaldheim before we jump into everything else, because that is what is being released at the moment. Dan, we want to hear which 3 cards you're most excited by, ranked probably third to first from the set. Since we're in the middle of preview season, let's find out.
So my third at this point with the previews I've seen, it's a cycle. It's these the common snow duels that they're putting out there. So there's one for each pairing. They come into play tapped. They're snow duel lands. I think as a commander player, these offer a great opportunity, not just for what they are, because obviously, like we've seen, like duels that come into play tapped. We have gates and things like that. But just more of these things at common gives people some easy wiggle room with like access to a better budget land base. And then also, if you're in like a small play group that's okay with proxies, these are very easy proxies for any dual land.
Right. Yeah. I'm also really excited. I think popper wise, right, in either popper commander or popper magic, like having fetchable dual lands or farseekable dual lands is like actually a big deal. Anytime there's a dual land that is objectively decent in enemy colors, I am always excited. Like there's definitely my red-white mana base for my red-white commander decks. I'm always just like, I literally have to just play every fetch, and I have to play as many of these. And some of them I'm playing like guild gates, right? Because it's like there's not enough dual lands to make sure you are able to do two red on turn 2 and 3 white on turn 3 without a lot of effort. And so I'm always excited for something that's fetchable or usable in that way. So that's really cool. And then, as a person who has played a lot of Valakut in my life,
having more
mountains
duels
are good.
that have mountains on them. I know. Well, every time they print one of these, that's a searchable duel like this, we all think similar things, and that is one of them, especially in singleton formats too, because in Highlander, we've talked about this before. Like we all have the Valakut deck, we all have like that deck with Scapeshift. So, and it's a pain. That's a hard mana base to build. So having every time they print another one of these, it's sweet that you get access to more of it. I agree too, though, that having searchable at common is a good thing, because all of the ones that have been printed to this point, even if they are like the cheap duels, they're still rares. They're still rares that you have to get. Mm-hmm. You open one box of this, you'll have one of every single one of these without.
Being fetchable, I think, is the biggest, coolest part of them being printed at common. It's just it's a nice move in a world where it feels like things are kind of like creeping up value wise. That having these be so accessible is going to be really cool for a lot of players in different formats.
I think Czech Lands are also like one of the cheapest, most reprinted good dual lands, right? And those are best accompanying shock lands or lands that have dual land types, because then they enter the battlefield untapped, but you have kind of perfectly fixed mana, and these offer for budget purposes that gameplay for everyone.
Yeah. So number 2, Kaldheim is doing so much fun stuff with cards that all of these sort of feel like cheating by picking one card. But one of the modal god cards is with Tybalt and Valky, God of Lies. I think this is going to be a really fun commander build. So for anybody at home, Valky, God of Lies is a 2 to cast 2/1 god. When he enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card they revealed this way until Valky leaves the battlefield. Tap X, choose a creature card, exile with Valky with converted mana cost X, and Valky becomes a copy of that card. And then the reverse side is Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter, 5, and then black-red. Enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with you may play cards exiled with Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells. His +2 is exile the top card of each player's library. His -3 is exile target artifact or creature. And then his -8 is exile all cards from all graveyards, add 3 red. This is just super fun, and the fact that it can sit in the command zone and be Rakdos and not have to like choose one or the other is really neat. And I love the build for particularly Valky. Like Tybalt's, obviously a cool bonus, but having such a versatile commander and not being stuck in mono black with him, I think just leaves like a lot of fun potential for building around this guy. I'm very excited to see. I'm waiting for more of this to see what sort of support there is, but I think he's one of the ones that I might focus on building.
Yeah, from a commander perspective, it gives something cool to red-white, which is like a red-white control deck almost that like has like a front end disruption piece that in the back end is like a great card advantage engine. Like not spoilery information for our eventual top 10 Kaldheim cards for Modern countdown episode we'll be doing in the next 3 or so weeks. This card, the rest of the set's going to have to work really hard to beat this card as my number one pick. The fact that you can Bloodbraid Elf into it and get the backside is insane.
That's crazy.
And is just and like the front side is a modern playable card. Kitestell Freebooter is a modern staple. This is a 2/1 that doesn't fly, but then also draws you a card. I would already have been considered playing this card in decks like Jund, regardless of the fact that now also I get to Bloodbraid Elf into a 7-drop Planeswalker.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I think it's really sweet. I mean, I think this is one of the coolest cards for sure. I think that front side being so good. So that's how these work, that if you flip this off of a Cascade card, you can get the backside. So it doesn't have the split card effect with those. It's
That's what I've heard. Yeah.
That's from, I believe, Matt Tabak. So it's like from the rules, or it was from someone on the rules committee in Wizards. So they're not a committee. The guy in charge of the rules at Wizards. So it's confirmed works with Cascade the way that I am very excited to do in Modern.
Sick.
And then, as a commander, I like all of the gods. I love non-creatures in the command zone. Just at a base level. It's one of the reasons even like Oathbreaker has appealed to me. The only reason I wouldn't build the white, the equipment, the like sword that this whole story is based around, is because it's just too similar to other decks I already have, which is like cards in play, into my graveyard, back into play, back into my graveyard, back into play. I have like maybe 6 different decks that all do that, and that deck would also just do that, so that might be problematic. But otherwise, I like having an equipment in the command zone sounds really, really, really cool. So I'm super hyped.
Yeah, I like looking deeper at like what a commander can be. I like having, it's the same way that when Commander Legends came out, I was very excited to get to play with new partners for the first time in forever. Just like the more variance they give the format, the better, because it Commander's all about customization. It's all about putting a little bit of yourself into your deck, and giving people more ways in which to do that, I think, is only a good thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of people are scared of it. I think it's going to be great.
This is the stuff that them playing around with, I don't think is going to damage the like Companion. Different conversation, right? That obvious. And in Commander, it actually ended up not being that big of a deal. In every other format is where it really broke Magic. But I've loved Companion since it came out. My biggest complaint was always like some of the Companion options are boring, and like I don't like the Idris Siddiqui or whatever is just like a 5-7 drop life gain big toughness matters card that I'm never going to play. But now I have like tons of options across the board that you get to play with that I think is like mixing and matching decks is really, really cool and lets you customize it even more. I mean, the reason I like Magic is because it is one of the few games in the world, at least in the first TCG, which all kind of do this, that lets you customize the board game you're playing with to your own style and invent something. So the fact that Companion lets you invent a commander is so cool. Number one card that has been previewed as of Tuesday the 12th.
My number one right now has got to be a Maskwood Nexus. So Maskwood Nexus is a 4-to-cast artifact. Creatures you control are every creature type. The same is true for creature spells you control and creature cards you own that aren't on the battlefield. Tap 3, tap it, create a 2/2 blue shapeshifter creature token with Changeling. This is a little selfish because I play a lot of tribal commanders, and also because I have an Atog deck. I have an Atog commander deck that I have been trying to resurrect. It was one of the first decks I built, and then once I like got better at the game, it just didn't scale with like the level I was playing at with my friends. So I kind of ended up taking it apart, and I feel like some of the like. I'm forgetting the name of the effect, but the effects that make all creatures into every type or, one uniform type. The appearance of those effects within Kaldheim is really exciting for me. And this card in particular the idea of just being able to make everything into an Atog, to be able to make a bunch of, little shapeshifters that I can feed to my commander, just opens up a lot of possibility. And in general, I just really like changeling-y flavored stuff. I think it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah. It was interesting because I am building purely because I dressed up in the David S. Pumpkins costume for as one of the costumes I wore this past Halloween, there were 30 of them. But eventually someone informed me that me and Gavin needed to battle each other, him playing a banana costume based commander being Tassiger, and then me having to play a pumpkin one, which is Reaper King. And so like I've been like picking up Reaper King cards. So I picked up every one of the other ones that are like all creatures types, because then Reaper King goes crazy. And then this card was printed. I was like, okay, finally I'm getting all the cards I need, because I think I have like 30 cards and I just don't know what else to put in there. And so it's not enough to make a deck. So it's like a pile of a half-built deck that's just been in a box under my desk for 2 months.
Standardize is the card I had been thinking of earlier that has the effect that makes everything into the same creature type.
Yeah, and there's a handful. Conspiracy was an old one from back in Mercadian Masks, and then got reprinted and time shifted. And then you have some of the other ones, like there was that artifact. Yeah, and there was an artifact equipment. There's Mistform Ultimus. There's a bunch of ones that do like similar things to this, but this is a really powerful version of it. I agree. It's definitely exciting, and it means a lot to decks that want to do some weird shenanigans in a way that they need an extra card to help them get there.
Well, and also just it lets you like take advantage of weird commanders that like have one ability that's useful, and then like a Lord ability that like has been irrelevant or just is like medium, and now you get to like take advantage of both halves. Also, exactly. You go randomly infinite with cards.
It's also nice to just see like they've been doing so much like interesting new stuff. Like I'm a big Omnath apologist. I love Omnath, but it's also because I'm an EDH player more so than a standard player.
Oh, because Omnath is fine outside of standard and maybe modern.
That was our take on the show, was that if he had been the face commander for the Zendikar commander deck, so much pain within the community would have been avoided, because he would have just been like a really wild commander, and that would have been it. But then I love that some of that same design, some of those big swings are making their way into more like out there casual cards like this. I mean, obviously there's some pretty busted stuff you can do with this as well, but even casual players will be able to get something out of it.
Yeah, card's really sweet.
Yep, I'm really, really hyped. All right, so far at this point, the 3 cards he's most excited by from the set. And now we're going to talk about some lasagna, which I don't know, and I don't even know if we could play it because I think we'd like terms of service, but there is a how to make lasagna song that basically, since this started re-blowing up 3 weeks ago on Twitter, has been stuck in my head. I'll link it below, or definitely find me on Twitter because I'll share it again if you at me. It's literally a rap song that goes step by step through the process of how to make lasagna.
Can I ask really quickly why it's called lasagna?
Lasagna Tier EDH. I have a thing. There's an infographic. Is a guiding philosophy that places a mutually enjoyable experience above any player's victory. Playing at Lasagna Tier means playing collaboratively rather than competitively, potentially sacrificing a win if it permits a better, more memorable game. Like any lasagna, the goal is to make dinner better for everyone, because no one should have to eat a whole lasagna alone. The Commander Sphere.
Why is it called the Lasagna Tier? That is what I want to know.
So one of our very first episodes was predictably the Commander online community was very bad about power level. It was just one of the many times that people have gotten into arguments about like the way we rate power, the way we rule zero our decks, the way we figure out like what type of Magic everybody's trying to play. And so me and Rachel were recording that night, and I said, what if we just like recorded our own tier list, like a new tier list for Commander? And what if it was basically nonsense? And so the two of us sat down and built out this tier list, which, just rattling off a few from memory, I mean, the lowest tier on this tier list was literally just objects. It was like a tier 9 commander deck is just like a potato. That would be a tier 9 deck. So like any object that's not actually 100 cards is a tier 9 commander deck. So it's like bicycles, cars. And so eventually through that list of tiers, the third one, I believe, third or fourth, was Lasagna Tier, which was just a recipe for a lasagna. And people just really seemed to resonate with the idea of it. Like it started to be something that with our patrons and our friends and anyone who listens to the show, lasagna kind of became like a shorthand term for the type of Magic that our podcast like really likes to, evangelize the type of Magic that we like to play, and just like our whole general gameplay philosophy. And so over like the last year or so, it's kind of become this bigger thing than it was originally planned to be. And so we decided to kind of legitimize it and like put our philosophy out into the world as Lasagna. And so that's where the name came from.
Because let your memes become dreams.
Exactly.
And so kind of as a concept and as like a power level, I feel like it's taken off a little bit recently because people are acknowledging that this is a particular way to play Commander that appeals to a certain type of player, which I think is why Alex and I were so interested in talking about it on the show tonight, because
yeah, so something that happened like 2 and 3 or 4 weeks or something within the time of the universe that no longer it's a flat circle. That happened is that like there was a part of the community that really started picking it up, and I think part of it at that point was also because Lasagna on your ranking was like where a 9 would be or where an 8 would be in some aspect of the word, because it was all kind of just made up at that point.
Yeah, it was like our second or third highest tier.
And so they were like, oh, this is great. This is the CDH community, but we want to play fun cards and a bottom level. And so they started running with it. And I think that at that point, there was kind of a realization that what Lasagna meant originally was slightly different from that concept. But then because of that, now both concepts have kind of grown into, honestly, kind of ranking power level less on necessarily like value of deck or how many tutors you're running, or it's more about what are your goals and type of fun you're having and while you're playing, and what does that look like. And I think that's what's been really interesting from a discourse perspective on that conversation, because as you've said, literally power level ranking on Magic decks is one of the like cliche, oh, it's November, I guess we're talking about this again every year. And this kind of takes that a little bit out of that as a bucket. So I think from what Ben is thinking of is in some ways what now has become that kind of Formula One racing joke that the other group has kind of started talking about versus Lasagna, is that there's fun in playing really powerful things, or there's fun in playing with cards you love that are good, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to be tuning them to be comboing off after tuning for 6 cards after wiping everyone's hand and then winning with a demonic consultation to a Thassa's Oracle. That's like not a world that most people want to play in. That doesn't mean if I'm playing with fetch lands, my deck is going to be better than yours, because I have fetch land decks that are terrible. Looking at you, Nin the Paint Artist.
Like for the longest time,
go ahead.
I've had a Mana Crypt for a long time, and this was before the reprints, so it was like harder to come by one of those, and so it was like definitely a spikier thing to have in a deck if you dropped one of those down. So the deck that I ran it in was my Atog deck, because I just wanted it to be very clear from the get-go, like, yes, this is a Mana Crypt, but Atog is in the command zone, so like don't be afraid of what's going to happen here.
Sure.
And so it's kind of that idea of like playing because you want to see your deck and your friends' decks do cool things more so than you want to win as quickly as possible. And like sometimes that means like avoiding, or not necessarily avoiding, but like pulling up on the gas a little bit when you could like just go straight for a win, so that the game can kind of develop a little more and people can feel like they got to do what they wanted to do with their decks. And then sometimes that also means knowing when to take the win. Like if someone's trying to board wipe and the game's been going for an hour and a half, like knowing like, okay, like we've all kind of done what we're going to do here, so now's like the time to like go for it. So it's kind of just like it's more of a choice in how you play than in how you build decks. Like I feel like a competitive deck could sit down and play a Lasagna tier game if the person piloting it knew what they were striving for.
Sure. Right. And I think that does speak in a lot of ways to like what a lot of people are looking for in a game of Commander. I think that's one of the reasons the power level conversation is so hard. Ben actually has had this conversation a lot with movie rankings, right? Like no one ranks a movie at a 4, even though most movies are 4s.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the scale that you're referring to that I think is like the accurate scale when ranking anything is that 10 and 0 are rare numbers. Like 0 has no value, and 10 is like the greatest of something that you ever experience. So if you're talking about a sandwich, I may not have a 10 once in a whole year if I eat a lot of sandwiches. Maybe I have 1. The 9s are going to be like the best sandwiches you have in a year. You probably have 3 of them or something like that. 8 is a phenomenal sandwich, like an absolutely incredible sandwich. It's just you have them a little more often. So if you're talking 5 is valuable. It's just dead average, right? That's like the way I like to rank anything is I like 10 to have a distinct value and 5 to be a clear average, whereas 7 is so often the average in people's minds that they like to use.
And that comes from grades, right? Like we all went to school as, at least in America, with the same grade system where like anything under a 65 was a fail, below a 70 is a D. And so like with that in mind, people like only really ranking things between 6 and 10. Then you apply that to Commander, where like, oh, my Commander deck's a 4. Like you have to have a specific opinion of yourself to rank it lowly in that way, which then makes it unhelpful. So it's either like you're being a hipster about it, which is fine. I've been a hipster about many things in my life. You're down on yourself, right? Like you're like, oh, I'm being like, I think I made this badly. Or you're going to be someone that's new. Like if you're new, you don't have the people who are actually probably playing 4s, right? Like, or pre-cons, those people don't know that they're playing a 4. From their perspective, oh, this is my 10. This is the best I can do. And then forcing them into the 4 category is always going to be like depressing / mean, maybe. So
so let me ask on that note, because I think this conversation has, in my opinion, 2 distinct parts. And the first part of it is that if you are only going to play with the real cards that you own 100% of the time, and it's just what you own and there's no proxies allowed, then you're talking about spacing out your powerful cards between decks, unless you just have the most insane collection in the world. And that's a whole different conversation. If you're just talking about conceptually, like, I'm going to build the deck that I want to build that exists with the Magic cards that exist, and I'm going to put as many of those cards together, then you arbitrarily have to make that decision of like, I'm only going to put this many powerful cards in the deck, because if you have access in your mind to every single Magic card ever, which is how I build. I don't build with what I own. I just build with some of what I own and some proxies. Then it's like, specifically, I'm not going to put Mana Crypt in this deck. Whereas in reality, like the CEDH community is like, Mana Crypt is going to go in 100% of decks, because why wouldn't it? Yeah. It's faster than your opponent.
In a Lasagna deck, too, like the thing would be that not having those cards wouldn't necessarily mean you couldn't play in a pod with somebody who did build with, anything on the table. Like I believe that a deck that has a lot of like powerful cards proxy could play alongside a deck that was just sort of built from a bunch of stuff that somebody had left over in their house, or some slightly upgraded precons. Like I think some of it is just a matter of knowing like who you're playing with, what they're hoping their deck can do, and then what you're hoping your deck can do, and what's a way to get as many people as possible, as close as possible to their like goal.
I think for me, like the big distinction was a conversation that Alex and I had about, I play this Jury Master of the Review deck, a black-red deck. And I started to look at the deck and being like, okay, so it's like sacrificing things, it's black-red. I could put, Murderous Redcap with Metallic Mimic and a Sack Outlet and go infinite and win the game, right? That seems like an easy thing to do. These are all cards that fit into my deck. It's a sacrifice goblin. It's all very good. And it's black, so Vamp Tutor. So I was like, okay, I'm going to add this, and I'll also, on top of my Vamp Tutor, I'll add Imperial Seal, and I already have Demonic Tutor. And Alex was like, yeah, but don't play Imperial Seal. He was like, why don't you not play Imperial Seal? And if you're going to put that in the deck, why don't you just play less tutors? Because that's not really very fun. And it's a fair point. However, like in my brain, I'm like, okay, if the arms race is to win the game, this is my out. This is if things don't go the way that I need them to, I can try to fish for this to still have a chance to win. And in my brain, that's the only way to play Magic. I can't stand the idea that I would lose to my cards not having enough power to dig me out, and a combo digs you out. So like, there's the philosophy, but how many tutors do you put in to get there?
Well, and I think something that did help you, Ben, I think 2 things helped. I think 2 things were good in helping you kind of figure this conversation out. One of them was you're an entertainer, and the concept of like, what is probably the most, like, you play Commander 99.999% that I know of, unless you're sneaking out Commander games behind my back and then you're cheating on me, is on stream, right? We're like doing it on camera. We're putting on a show, and like, there's an honest conversation on like, it ends up that the things that people find the most fun are also probably things that are going to be the most entertaining on camera. No one wants, no one wants to get to the point where someone's like just Jockle Hopsed everyone out of the game, and we're now just like on stream for an hour as we like hope we draw 2 lands enough to like put a creature into play and then win or not win. No one in entertainment value is like really looking for the Narset combos to happen, unless you're at CDH levels where like every deck is playing 90% demonic tutors so that they can dig themselves out very quickly out from a Narset wheel. Like it's just not fun to watch from a viewership perspective because nothing's happening. You want things to happen. And when you're live streaming, even more so than like a game nights environment where they could edit out that dead time, you don't get to edit that out. It's live, baby.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think the difference between what I'm talking about, like a 3-card combo that auto wins based on tutors, and like the Arami deck that I was playing with, like Deceiver Exarch and making, 19 precursor golems, it's still really powerful, oppressively powerful if it gets going, but it's so much more interesting and cool and weird and it's overwhelming, but it's also like, look at all this. Look at all these wonderful, crazy things you're doing, these card interactions. That's really cool to see.
Rachel has a deck that I think really kind of exemplifies the philosophy. Her Feldegriff deck. She has, I believe, like one combo that goes infinite in it, but it's like a 5 or 6 piece combo that involves the card Dingus Staff. That just ends up giving people infinite hippos, and then like people like siphoning life from everybody, and it drains the table out. And it's a very hard combo to put together, and it's a very fun road to get there because like the deck starts by like giving hippos to people and things like that. And so I think that is a lot of the type of philosophy. It's like there are certain card choices that you wouldn't make if you were making a competitive deck, like, something like a Dingus Staff that can still be really powerful when you're playing in a pod where people are looking for those big flourishes more than a quick win. Like if you know that nobody's going to try to combo off on turn 3 or 4 and you have that time to kind of stretch out a little bit more, there are more options of things you can pull off, I think.
Yeah, I think that's like a really good philosophy. It was interesting. It's interesting in the same way that like, and this is maybe a non sequitur, but the most success I've had at getting people that are adults to like Star Wars, that like have missed Star Wars up to adulthood, right? They're like 35. They like didn't want to watch it, which like means that they're probably not going to want to watch it. And the one I've had most success on is like not attacking it in the way that you think you would, right? Like don't watch it in order. Don't watch episode 1 first. Don't watch A New Hope first. Maybe watch Force Awakens. This was a theory created before the new movies. That movie's like very modern and easy to jump into, but like it's attacking at a different level. Like, oh, Ben, this needs to be as entertaining as possible. Hey, cousin Seth, who's never watched Star Wars, watch Empire Strikes Back first. You don't have to watch another single one of them. Start with this random one. It's the best one. You're watching the best one. So from this point on, if you don't like it, you're not going to like it. But there's one movie. You no longer have to watch 17 movies to be able to that's not the endeavor I'm putting you on. I'm putting you on a 2-hour experience. And in Commander, figuring out the entree of like, don't build the most powerful thing. Build something that like, and like, how do you explain that? And I think Lasagna Tier as almost a concept helps get that across.
I think for newer players, that is like it's almost like a commercial for the format where it's like this, you watch a game where, every single deck gets a shot at winning, and sure, only one deck gets to go home with it. But like we all have had those games in Commander where your deck does exactly what you wanted it to, and you don't even take home the win, but you still feel like hell yeah, like that did exactly what I designed it to do. And the fact that I didn't win is like secondary to the fact that like this machine is running as programmed, which is like just a very fun feeling.
Well, I think another thing when you talk about Lasagna Tier, it's so. Again, we'll compare it to CDH because that is, my understanding is CDH is the top of the top in terms of power level in Commander, right? There's nothing more powerful than what people are doing in CDH.
I think its definition is that, right? So It's a self-fulfilling I don't know which is first, the egg or the chicken, but yes.
So it's kind of that thing with your card pool is so wide and so vast. Every single card in your deck will be a good card if you're playing a CDH deck. They all will be good, and if they're not all good, they will all be uniquely suited towards winning with that strategy. Like they'll be the best version of the mathematically refined concept of that strategy, and that's what that deck will be. If you're building a Lasagna Tier deck, I think not every card necessarily has to be a good card. You have the freedom to put cards in your deck that are just fine, but they're very cool with what you're doing, and they're powerful enough. Like I can't think what it is right offhand. It's a 2-drop from like Beyond Death that's like Blood March Aspirant or something. It's the same thing as Jury. It gets a counter whenever a permanent is sacrificed, but it doesn't have Jury's other text. That card's not that powerful. It just isn't that powerful. Wily Goblin is in my deck because it's just a creature that I can sacrifice that also makes another permanent that furthers my plan, that I can sacrifice that permanent for mana that helps Jury. But it's kind of a weak card. But in my mind, it's cute enough and it's fun enough that I'm willing to put it in the deck. And I like the interaction between like my commander and those cards enough that I can like talk myself into keeping them in there. And to me, if I was playing in the model of like CDH, I wouldn't be able to convince myself to do that. That doesn't make any sense. Those cards aren't powerful enough.
Yeah, well, because like tier wise, I think like any deck that's not fully optimized, like you would sit down in a CEDH pod and they'd say that's not a CEDH deck. Whereas with this, it's like you can, like I run Baron Glory in that Atog deck. That was like one of the main win cons was just to wipe out my own entire board and win with Baron Glory. You can't do that obviously in a very competitive pod. And so like when you know that that's the type of stuff that people are doing, like when you have to optimize everything, so many cards are off the table, so many fun gameplay possibilities will never see the light of day simply because there's a marginally better choice out there or a much, much better choice. like something that's not marginally better, it's leaps and bounds better. And so like having all those cards be off the table from the start can be almost sad because like part of the fun of EDH is that pool is, at this point so massive that you want to see cards you've never seen before. You want to see somebody else at the table say like, wait, how does that interaction work? And then once you explain it to them, they go like, oh, that rules. Like that's the best experience in the game. I think one of them at least.
I also think to that end, like we talked about the highest end of power and what's above, but then if you want to talk about what's below Lasagna Tier, I think it's the idea that you have to sort of win the game very slowly or very fairly. And I think what I look for when I'm building decks, I'm just building them to be creative, is I'm looking for card interactions that I think are clever and still win the game out of nowhere, but they are doing it in a way that I don't think other people would see coming. Like a great example, again, in the Jury deck is I have Tainted Strike in the deck. I love the idea of playing Tainted Strike in the Jury deck because, yeah, it's really cool. It's a cool idea that I would have this giant Jury that's just sitting out there, and then like for 1 black in response to something else happening, I'll be able to give my thing infect when it dies and just kill someone, right? Yeah. It's really powerful. That's an out of nowhere win, but it's not so powerful that like the counterspell is not going to change it from happening, or that, you know what I mean? There's enough ways to get around it.
Any interaction spell over invented stops that card.
Yeah, it's just janky. It's super
Removal spell,
janky.
Counterspell, right.
I run it in a great example of like kind of pulling a play a little bit because of like, the agreed upon tier. I have it's like a very Vorthos, like lore heavy, like thematic Doran Infect deck where the idea is just like, it's like a big, bright, sunshiny tree folk toughness matters deck that then has Phyrexian oil all over it. And so the idea is that all these tree folk have been destroyed and completed by Phyrexians and now have Infect.
So that's what's happened to Lorwyn.
Yeah, exactly. That's where Lorwyn's been all this time. And so, like, obviously, Infect can be, like, a bit of a feel-bad. Like, one time in an opening hand, I had the 3 lands I was going to need to get Doran out, a Fire Shrieker, and Tainted Strike. So I was like, I have lethal on somebody, like, very, very quickly. Like, so I needed to, like, consciously understand, like, oh, like, we all agreed to play a particular game here, and that game does not involve me using the Infect deck that I swore was thematic and not ruthless to kill somebody on turn 3 just because I drew the perfect hand to do so. And so I like waited and then still ended up winning with that Tainted Strike. But like 5 or 6 turns later, when everyone's like board state had developed and it felt more earned by the end of the game.
Just a question for you guys both. Like, so what you just talked about is that you had the things in your opening hand that were like kind of oppressively powerful. Like you could have done something really unfair and unfun and taken someone out right away. And then the game would have gone on and that person just wouldn't have been playing. And if your purpose was to win the game, reducing one of your opponents with a single interaction is a totally good way to win. That's a great way. You make less people on the board. But, like it isn't fun. So you chose to play differently. And that's what it really asks. The question is, what's the purpose? If you're playing like a Lasagna Tier game, what's the purpose? Is the purpose to win, or is the purpose to have fun and be the last one standing?
I think the purpose is to have that good time, like to have as many people as possible at that table feel like they had fun. Because like obviously the winner always has a pretty good time unless everybody like gets really mad at them for winning. But like usually winning feels pretty good.
They'll have a good time until we take them out back and take out their kneecaps.
Then it's then it's all off the books. But it's like I think if everybody feels like they had an equal shot at the game and just that they felt like they got to be part of it. Like it's not fun to be the first person eliminated from a 4-person pod. It's not fun, especially if that happens 20 minutes in and then you have to sit around for like another half hour to an hour while the game wraps up because like killing you became the main focus or something. Like it's never, you want to play. We build the decks, we get together with our friends because we want to play the game. And so the idea behind it is just making sure that even though eventually there always comes a time where you have to start eliminating people, like games do have to end, but that it's done in a way that isn't just in the name of like a victory. So it's not like, oh, my friend is mana screwed, so I'm going to take him out because his board state's wide open. It's like, why not then go for somebody who's board? It's kind of like a pick on somebody your own size type thing.
And I think there's also, it's an interesting conversation about combos because there's two types of combos in the game of Commander, right? There's the combo that kills one player, Tainted Strike, or there's the combo that kills everybody. And then there's kind of when to use that combo, I guess is the third question. And I think that something that people make mistakes going into Lasagna Tier Magic that like ends up with it being in the other direction of bad is, or not like Lasagna Tier, but casual Magic is like not having win conditions. And like I make this mistake sometimes where I'm like, oh, I'm like going to make it bad because I'm just not going to include Thassa's Oracle. But then I like will take a 20-minute turn, draw my whole deck, and be like, oh wait, I don't have a way to win, so I've now wasted everyone's time. Like accidentally, or like, and then to kind of what was just being discussed, which was like Tainted Strike versus like the worst thing you could do for someone's fun is to kill them first, but then not have a way to kill everyone else.
Rachel and I have like thought about this a little bit before because we have very different perspectives on it. Because Rachel's like a very experienced player and has been playing for a good bit longer than I have. And I've really only been back in the game for about 2 years now. So I'm like just starting to feel like my like deck building ability has gotten to the point where things can be very ruthless and like that I'm making my decks more casual as a choice as opposed to just because of the limitations of my own ability to deck build. And so my perspective tends to be that like a big part of Lasagna Tier is making sure to like make space for players whose decks aren't 100% going off the way they want to. But then Rachel tends to like remind me of the other half of things, which is like what happens when somebody tries to go, for a board wipe and the game's been going for an hour and a half and they probably don't have a way to win. Like, because that's also not a very Lasagna Tier move. Like if the game's been going on and someone's trying to win and you're going to counter their win con, but you have nothing left of your own, like then what is the
let's reshuffle and start something new.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's no purpose in drawing out that game any longer if everyone has kind of done everything they can and all you have left is like filibustering basically.
It's like a very waterbendy like experience within Magic of like knowing when is the best time based on the energy of the game you're playing to strike and murder everyone so that everyone has the maximum amount of fun. And like obviously getting that perfect moment is just never going to happen but like striving for that is maybe the goal.
Like if CDH and things like that are more like sports where it's like there is a winner, there is a loser, and the goal is to win, as decisively and not be the loser. Then Lasagna Tier Magic is more like D&D where it's like we are all working together to build this thing and we're trying to make it fun and mutually enjoyable for all of us. And like, in a D&D session, like somebody kills the monster eventually. Like usually like there are moments of victory in D&D that can't necessarily be shared between everyone, but you want it to feel like when it ends, when it wraps up, that you all contributed to it together. You want to feel like you brought something to the table.
Right.
Well, I think it's funny because Alex, when you and I first started arguing about EDH on the show years ago, I played EDH back in 2007 or something like that a bunch, like back when it was just getting popular or probably earlier than that, but around that time. But when you and I would argue about it, I always would say to you, it's a different game. You're not playing the same game of Magic. A lot of the mechanics are the same. And certainly you can approach combat steps and things like that the same way, but it is a different game. You're not really playing it the same way. The goal is different. The interaction is different. Even the scalability of the cards, the way that most of them were created, they're created for a different type of Magic. They're created for that 1v1. And even though they print cards now for Commander, there's still such a small amount of them compared to the rest of the game's history. And what I've really learned is that even though it's a different game, it still functions the same way. It's just the balance, the mechanics feel different while you're doing them. So you used the example to me the other day when you were talking about our friend Austin that you used to play with, and he would sandbag lands. He would sandbag lands early on so that like it would look like he was mana screwed.
Yeah.
And you'd take it easy on him, and then he'd start hitting his land drops after missing 2 in a row or something like that. So everybody would think that he was behind, when in reality he was just making sure that people didn't go after him. And I thought that was so interesting because, like, strategically, that's not really so different than like sideboarding in a specific way in game 2. If you're playing in a, like you have a strategy and you're playing it in a certain way. The one thing about it that's different, and where I do believe it is a different game, is exactly what you were talking about just a minute ago, Dan, about you would specifically not go for the powerful move because you want everybody's experience to be the most enjoyable. And that's why people in EDH will do things like kill you just before you kill someone else just for the fun of it, or counter your spell just because they want it to be more interesting, because it just makes the game feel a little bit more communal. And that's why it is truly a different game. It is, you call it a version of Magic the Gathering, but it doesn't function the same way that any competitive version of Magic. It doesn't even function the same way that CEDH does.
Especially because, like the multiplayer aspect of it, and then, when you remove the competitive aspect, it truly, truly is a different game, I think, in so many ways.
Yeah, and something that like you mentioned CDH and the deck building requirements of like having to pick the very best card for every card, and it's kind of the thing that now that we've played a bunch of it, I like was starting to like, I don't want to do CDH every month, or like more than twice a month, or more than once a month, and it was kind of just like your card choices are really limited. Like everything you're playing feels very samey, and like when I'm trying to play Commander, the goal of this is to have variety, right? I want every experience to be unique and different. And when I was like, every game I'm playing is fascinating, and it's really cool to figure out the puzzle, and it's really cool that it's like a game state where people then have conversations multiple turns on like, okay, everyone, what is the optimal way we can play here, but also manipulating you is like fascinating and really fun. But on the same hand, like 99 of the cards of the deck are just basically decided ahead. Like I couldn't brew in CDH without a year of like really, really, really actively trying to figure out every part of the metagame, versus Commander, which like Modern kind of feels in what Modern was, right? Where you can kind of come up with cool ideas. You can do new stuff in the format, and Commander always allows you to create something new and or invent something. And that's something that CDH kind of always feels like it's lacking. Like there's a metagame and you have to fall within the metagame. Commander, Lasagna Tier doesn't necessarily have that as much of a feature, and it's going to be interesting too, because I think we are running a little bit low on time, so I don't want to delve too in here, but I think in a couple weeks we'll also have Mike from the Commander's Arena YouTube channel on to talk about what he's now working on, which is basically Lasagna Tier meets CDH, because I think that's also another thing that is going to be really interesting. And I wanted to touch upon it a little bit today, but I just think we're running out a little bit low on time. Just because we've been having a great conversation. And I want to get kind of some of your final thoughts, Dan, on just like the subject matter at large, and then we'll kind of move into shout outs and wrap ups and get to the next part of the world, which is saying goodbye. But before that, make sure to check out Patreon. We want to do the 5 episodes a day, and we need your help, and you get the full raw feed, and it's all video now, and there's an extra 10 minutes. And now, Dan, what's up?
Well, I guess my like final thoughts on it would be just that I do believe it's something that's possible to do at every power level. And I was like, it was exciting to see people from the CEDH world getting excited about it, because to me, what it showed was that even at that higher level of power, even at that like much more like fast paced, powerful level of play, like that there was still that desire to put more self expression into decks, and that desire to like focus more on the communal experience. And so I'm like personally super glad that people in the like looking for that powerful just below CEDH Lasagna Tier like have something that they can play. But I also just think it's more of a gameplay philosophy than it is like a tier of power. It's just a way of expressing what you want from the game and like how you hope to achieve that. And like I hope that, in my dream world for like the tier and the way that people perceive it is that it becomes a shorthand for just like, this is the type of Magic I play. So like your weirdest deck can feel safe playing against my deck. And like, even if they're not matched up perfectly power level wise, like I'm with you, and I'm trying to like make sure that this is a fun game for both of us.
Yeah, I think I really like what I like about the idea of Lasagna Magic, or just like the concept behind it, is that the rating system is flawed, and we kind of talked about it today, where it's a double-edged sword, right? Like on one hand, I think there needs to be a way, an already pre-decided way to have a conversation ahead of time on what style of commander you're going to be playing. I think that like relying on, especially in a world where people are going to card stores or command fests, or are playing on command fests online and through spell table and discords, where you're playing against people you don't know, or there's pods being assigned at your local game store, and you don't have only your like best friends or who you're playing Magic with, which is true for a lot. Like for us, it happened, that's more often how I'm playing commander than just like only with the same 3 friends. And like in that world, expecting strangers to like have a heart-to-heart conversation before every game on like, oh well, I like don't want to play wheels, but I do like fast mana, but I don't like tutors. Like it's
right.
It's asking a lot from not only from a like people, but also add the whole layer that there is a chunk of the Magic community that communication is not their best strength. They're extremely intelligent, but getting words across is not always is something that is expected. And so finding established ways to communicate that aren't necessarily then leaning on the ranking systems, which we discussed is flawed, because no one can self-regulate their own deck, because everyone went to school, and giving yourself lower than a C grade on anything sucks.
Yeah, I think 1 through 10 leaves a lot to be desired, and like I definitely don't think we can ever get to a point where there's like a completely bespoke commander experience where it's like, oh well, I don't like this one specific type of win con, so can you please not play that? More so than just the idea that like you're not going to have to worry about, say, like a deck that locks you out of casting spells turn 2 or something like that. That an emphasis on fun at least means like this deck will let you play your deck, and like I'm still going to try to win, but I'm not going to try to win in a way that prevents you from doing the things your deck came here to do.
I mean, one of the things that people talk about, and I've had this conversation with many Magic players, that if you ask a Magic player, and this is not commander related, but just when you play against the deck, what is the most frustrating like play style? What is the most frustrating strategy to play against? And the easy options that always come up are the like draw go counterspell deck, which is a really frustrating deck to play against, where it's just like mono blue and they have all the counterspells. Land destruction, which is also extremely annoying. Hand disruption, which can be really, really, really annoying. But like, there's probably 4 or 5 strategies like this that are just, I hate doing that. And I found that I complained so much playing against a lot of these strategies that eventually I had to just say to myself, like, you're just talking about like all of the powerful things that the colors in Magic do. So fast mana probably being another one of them. And if you really want to not be so pissed off about it, you have to just figure out a way to not lose to all of those things. You just have to you have to be more proactive, or your deck has to not shrink to 1 disruption spell, or you need to play more lands, like whatever it is. And I think it's kind of the same thing with Commander. Like we played with BDM on one of our streams recently, and he came in and the game was super fun. But beforehand, he was like, yeah, I just want the power level to be at like this level. And his deck ended up being insanely powerful and crushed me, I think. I seem to remember. I don't remember when this was, but once the engine got going, his deck was like unstoppably good. And I was just like, the power of what you're doing is like insane. It's not just like a mana crypt into something else really good on turn 3, but like you baited me into playing cards that weren't as powerful so that you could like sledgehammer me with your really powerful cards that just developed a little slower. And it's just funny because I think the idea of doing the slow developing, extremely powerful thing is a more comfortable notion for so many people. When an Armageddon or just countering all the things or playing stacks or whatever it is, people like frown upon those things because they seem like they're cheaper, they're easier or something.
I think there's some part of it is also just like inherently to like the mechanics of Commander by being a multiplayer format. And by that I mean like I have 3 turns before it's my turn. And so because of that, if you're the first player and you're no longer negative affected, right? You get to draw a card on your first turn. So if you're player 1, by the time I get my second turn as player 4, you've taken 2 of your turns, and there's been 7 turns since my last turn. And because of that, you can combo on turn 2, and I could have played 1 land and like not drawn a card. And like because of that, the like slow development process, I think, is something that people are a little bit more interested in because there's just so much of a weighted and add the layer that like a counterspell is worse in Commander because I'm 1 for 3ing myself every time I use one. They're still powerful because they are.
Right.
I stop the thing, but they are less good because it's not 1v1. I'm stopping your one thing with my one thing. I'm stopping your one thing against 2 other players' things. And the same way Force of Will is good, even though you're losing 2 cards to stop their one thing, they can be good in Commander, but it still is a card disadvantage. And so it's just kind of balancing that with the casual side of things. And I think if I were to answer your question, which I would like to actually hear Dan's answer too, in Commander, what is your least favorite thing to play against? And I think at this point it's mass discard, and specifically more in like the I Wheel, basically the Hull Breacher, Narset, that world. When that happens, I'm always just like, I no longer get to do anything, and I'm no longer able to try and be able to do something. Like it's not even it's like a lock of like Leovold is. I'm so glad Leovold was banned. Like that card sucked. What's your least favorite thing to face?
I think for me, it's always been like stacks and tax decks. Anything that makes it so it's like, all my lands come into play tapped, or all my creature, like you can only cast 1 spell per turn, or just anything that makes it so that I have my deck, but I don't have the ability to play it. Or like the board state can't be interacted with in any sort of meaningful way. Feeling locked out is just not fun. It's just there's so much potential energy there, and you never get to do anything. And then at a certain point, especially like in a really good oppressive stacks deck, it sort of just feels like 3 people watching 1 person play solitaire, and that can get pretty rough. So I think that's my personal pet peeve. I've seen it done in ways that don't bother me as much, but like it typically falls in Azorius and things like that. Just those more aggressive stacks decks, I think are.
Ben, what is your least favorite way? Now that you've played for 6 months, what are the things that have been done to you that was your least favorite?
In Commander, probably it's the experiences that I've had that I've found the most annoying are the ones where I feel like there's like some difficult to get around like thing that foils my deck. Like it just like screws my deck.
Like turning your commander into a forest.
I mean, that was like really obnoxious, right? And what it made me realize is that like that deck can't really function without its commander. It's just a really boring deck to play if the commander's not working. So then you having like a clever way to take out my commander that blue-black just doesn't do very well dealing with. I was just like, this is really unfun. I don't want to like hit my land drops and like cast 6-drop creatures, and it's gonna be worse than everything you guys are doing. I don't think I have a specific thing that I dislike, but if you were gonna ask me what is the element of Commander that I so far have found that I dislike the most, it's how long it takes for it to be your turn again when your deck's not working. That's the thing. Yeah. That's the single thing that if I was able to like. It's the only thing that when I'm playing games of Commander that I check out and I just am like, why am I doing this? This is taking me like 2 hours to not do anything. I'm just sitting here waiting to draw a card, hoping that I can play this thing in my hand. But because of that dumb Planeswalker or that stupid like thing that is like, I can't search my library or my graveyard's gone or whatever it is, like even if I draw my thing, I'm still not going to be able to do anything. And it's when you start to fall behind.
Other people's board states can really start to feel like nails on a chalkboard, no matter what they are. Where it's just like, oh, your thing's working, but mine's not. Like, and especially when everyone's in like the 5-minute turn territory, like as a game's starting to really kick into high gear. If you're still at the point of just like draw, not what I needed, pass.
Yeah, like everyone just took a 15-minute turn. It took 20 minutes to get to me, and I played a land and drew a card.
So I could draw a card. Well, because think about it, right? If we talk about the comparison of multiplayer Magic to 1v1 Magic, the actual resources that you start the game with. It's bad enough to get mana screwed against one person. That's already the worst part of Magic is getting mana screwed or mana flooded. Getting mana screwed or mana flooded against 3 people, they would never have designed the game that way if playing with 4 people was going to be the way Magic was done. Because they would have just been like, anytime anyone ever gets mana screwed and it takes 15 minutes for their turn, they'll just quit playing Magic the next day. There's no way they'd ever go back to that. It only got introduced later on as something that you would do that you accepted because it's just part of the game. That's inherently the issue with mana screw and mana flood. So I don't think I'm alone there. I have to think that that's a pretty common feeling, but it's definitely one that bums me out. That'll be like probably the number one thing.
And like Wizards just put a lot of work, right, to like see if they can avoid those situations from happening, right? The new mulligan rule, plus like now pretty much Commander players just like mulligan until you draw the cards you need. You going down to 5 is not worth anyone's time.
Oh, in casual pods, that's how it always tends to go. Yeah, you just kind of draw until you get a hand that seems fun.
So, Dan, where can people find you? Where is the best place to hear more content like this?
If you're looking for the podcast, Commander Sphere comes out every Monday. You can find us on Twitter at Command Sphere. That handle, Command Sphere, is for Instagram. It's for Twitch. We stream on the first and third Tuesday of every month. Yeah, so every Monday, me and Rachel Weeks. You can find me on Twitter at It's Dan Sheehan, and you can find Rachel on Twitter at Rachel Reeks.
Cool. And you can follow us. I'm at Kess Wiley on everything. We also do Commander live streams every Monday at 7:30, which I believe you will be on our Commander stream leading up to these episodes coming out. So either if you're watching this on Monday morning, depending on when it comes out, make sure to check out the Commander stream tonight. Dan will be there, and we'll be playing some Lasagna Magic. Or that will live as a VOD on the YouTube channel as well. So you can check out that game. It's on the channel as we speak. And we do Commander content every Monday. So 7:30 p.m. PST, live stream on Kess Wiley, twitch.tv/Kess Wiley. Plus, I'm on Twitter. Follow me there. I have takes. Generally, it's about creating a positive chaos in the world. I stumble into goodwill, hopefully. And Ben, where can people find you?
You guys can find me at Ben Bateman Media, Twitter, Instagram, Ben Bateman Streaming on Twitch. And thank you guys so much for watching what we're doing. As Alex mentioned, we have Patreon stuff that we are talking about. But the key is that if you guys want to keep supporting what we do here, it's getting harder and harder for us to do. So please go to patreon.com/the MMcast and support it. It definitely goes a long, long way towards making this thing happen.
If you like the kind of the bite chunk versions of the episodes, think about this episode. We did a top 3 cards that Dan's excited about coming out. We had an entire conversation about Lasagna Magic, and then we had this whole conversation about White, and those could have been 3 different videos, but now they're going to be one video. But if you guys really help and want to check out our Patreon, we thought it was really cool. It definitely, I think, was something that everyone really appreciated. It's expensive. It puts a lot of work on Marshall. It becomes much more of a day-to-day thing that he has to help manage. So if we can raise some funds on our Patreon, that's really appreciated. And if you do that, you do get access to the video format of the raw feed, which includes 10 minutes of bonus content at the very beginning. So you don't even have to, if you want to watch that 10 minutes of bonus content and then wait until it's edited on the YouTube channel, you could do that. So that's one of the cool perks you get if you're a patron. And we're also open to hearing other things that you would maybe want, but that would be really, really exciting and helpful.
Please.
And that is all. Thank you so much, Dan. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you. This was a blast.
This has been a production of Time Traveler Media, sending podcasts into the future.